I used to believe that betrayal only happened in movies. You know the kind, dramatic music, slow-motion heartbreak, and people screaming in the rain. But in real life, betrayal is quiet. It creeps into your life slowly, disguised as trust. My name is Emily Carter, and until 6 months ago, I thought my life was perfectly normal. I had a boyfriend I loved, and a best friend I trusted more than anyone. Looking back now, I realize the signs were always there. I just refused to see them. The city where I lived was the kind that looked beautiful from far away. Boston. Old brick buildings lined the streets like quiet witnesses to thousands of stories. Love stories, tragedies, secrets. The air always carried a mix of coffee, ocean breeze, and the faint hum of traffic that never really slept. My apartment sat on the third floor of a narrow building in Back Bay. It wasn't big, but it felt like home. Soft beige walls. A couch covered with knitted blankets. Plants on the windowsill that I tried desperately to keep alive. And pictures. Lots of pictures. Pictures of me. Pictures of my boyfriend, Ryan. And pictures of my best friend, Sophie. The three of us looked happy in every photo, which at the time we were, or at least I thought we were. I met Ryan 3 years ago. It was a rainy afternoon in October. I had ducked into a small coffee shop to escape the storm, shaking rainwater from my hair and cursing my broken umbrella. The place smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. Warm lights glowed against wooden walls. And Ryan sat by the window with a laptop and a half-finished cappuccino. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything. "Excuse me," I had said awkwardly, pointing to the empty chair across from him. "Do you mind if I sit here? Every other table's taken." He looked up, dark brown eyes, a crooked smile. "Sure," he said. That smile should have been my first warning. It was the kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. The kind of smile that could hide 1,000 lies. But at the time, all I saw was charm. Our conversation started with small talk. Weather, coffee, work. Ryan worked in marketing for a tech start downtown. I was finishing my final year in graphic design. He laughed easily, listened carefully, and by the time the rain stopped, we had already been talking for 2 hours. Before leaving, he asked for my number. I gave it to him without hesitation. That night, Sophie called me. "Okay," she said immediately. "Tell me everything." Sophie had been my best friend since high school. We met during freshman orientation when she accidentally spilled orange juice on my shoes. Instead of apologizing, she laughed so hard she cried. I should have been annoyed. Instead, I laughed with her. And just like that, we became inseparable. Sophie was the kind of person who filled every room with energy. Loud, funny, confident. If I was quiet and cautious, Sophie was fearless. We balanced each other perfectly. Or so I believed. "So what's his name?" she demanded over the phone. "Ryan." "Is he cute?" "Yes." "How cute?" I hesitated. "Very." She gasped dramatically. "Oh my God, you like him already." I laughed. "Relax. It was just coffee." But Sophie wasn't convinced. "Emily," she said, lowering her voice like she was revealing a secret. "I have a feeling this one's different." For once, she was right. Ryan and I started dating a month later. Our relationship moved slowly at first. Movie nights, late-night walks along the Charles River, Sunday brunch at tiny cafes where the waiters already knew his order. Ryan had this way of making everything feel effortless, like love wasn't something you worked for. It just happened, and Sophie adored him. The first time they met was during my birthday dinner. We had gone to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The skyline glowed like a field of stars. Sophie arrived 20 minutes late, dramatic as always. She slid into the chair beside me, eyeing Ryan curiously. "So," she said with a teasing smile, "you're the famous Ryan." Ryan laughed. "I didn't know I was famous." "Oh, you are," Sophie replied. "Emily talks about you constantly." I blushed instantly. "That's not true." "Sure it isn't," Sophie teased. Ryan grinned. "I'll take it as a compliment." And just like that, the two of them clicked. Too well. They joked together, shared stories, even teamed up to tease me. At the time, it made me happy. My boyfriend and my best friend getting along felt like the perfect situation. Looking back now, I realize that was the night everything started. Over the next 2 years, the three of us became almost inseparable. Friday dinners, weekend trips, game nights at my apartment. Sometimes Sophie would show up unannounced with pizza and wine. Ryan never seemed surprised to see her. In fact, sometimes he looked excited, but I ignored that feeling because trust is a powerful thing. It blinds you to the truth. The first crack appeared on a cold winter evening. Snow covered the streets like white silence. Ryan was supposed to meet me for dinner, but an hour passed. Then another. No message. No call. Finally, my phone buzzed. Ryan. Sorry, babe. Work emergency. Rain check. I sighed. It wasn't the first time, but something about it felt off. Just as I started putting away the candles I had lit for dinner, another notification appeared. It was Sophie. She had posted an Instagram story, a short video, loud music, dim lights, people laughing, and for a split second, I saw him, Ryan, standing in the background behind her. My stomach dropped. I replayed the video 3 times. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe it just looked like him. But deep down, I already knew. I texted Sophie immediately. Where are you? She replied within seconds. Just out with friends. Friends. My fingers hovered over the screen. Should I ask? Should I confront her? But fear stopped me. Because sometimes you'd rather live in a lie than face the truth. So I did nothing. I told myself it was coincidence. I told myself I was imagining things. And life went on. For a while. Until the night, everything finally shattered. It was a Friday. Ryan had the spare key to my apartment. I came home early from work with takeout and a stupid romantic plan. I opened the door quietly. The lights were dim, and I heard voices. A woman's voice, laughing, soft, familiar. My heart started pounding. Slowly, I walked toward the bedroom. The door was half open, and when I looked inside, my entire world collapsed. Because the 2 people I trusted most in the world, Ryan and Sophie, were in my bed, together. In that moment, time stopped. The room spun. My chest felt hollow. And all I could think was one simple question. How long? How long had they been lying to me? But what they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was that this moment wouldn't destroy me. It would change me. Because that night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Instead, I started planning my revenge. And when I was done with them, their lives would never be the same again. The strange thing about betrayal is that the moment it happens, your world doesn't explode the way you expect it to. There's no dramatic music, no thunder cracking in the sky. Instead, everything becomes painfully quiet, like the world itself is holding its breath. That's exactly how it felt standing outside my own bedroom that night. My hand was still resting against the doorframe, my takeout bag slipping slowly from my fingers onto the hardwood floor. The smell of sesame chicken filled the hallway, but suddenly even that familiar scent made my stomach twist with nausea. Inside the room, Sophie laughed again, the same bright laugh I had heard thousands of times over the past decade. But now it sounded different, sharper, cruel. Ryan's voice followed, low and amused, whispering something I couldn't fully hear. The sheets rustled. My chest tightened so painfully I thought I might collapse right there. For a moment, I wondered if I should burst into the room and scream, demand answers, throw something, anything. But my body refused to move. Instead, I stepped backwards slowly, quietly, as if I were the intruder in my own home. I backed down the hallway until their voices faded, then slipped out the front door and closed it behind me without making a sound. The cold Boston air hit my face like a slap. Snowflakes drifted lazily through the streetlights, melting against the warmth of my skin. Cars passed by. People walked their dogs. Couples laughed together on the sidewalk. Life continued normally around me, which felt almost offensive. How could the world keep moving when mine had just shattered? My legs carried me down the street automatically, though I had no idea where I was going. My mind replayed the image over and over again like a cruel loop. Sophie's blonde hair against my pillow, Ryan leaning over her, the two of them tangled together like they belonged there. The worst part wasn't just the cheating. It was the familiarity of it, the comfort. They hadn't looked nervous or guilty. They had looked comfortable, like this wasn't the first time. That realization cut deeper than anything else. By the time I reached the small park near the river, my fingers were numb from the cold, but my mind was suddenly clear in a way it hadn't been before. I sat down on a frozen bench and stared at the dark water, moving slowly beneath the bridge lights. That was the moment the anger finally arrived. It wasn't loud at first. It didn't explode like fireworks. Instead, it crept in slowly, like a low-burning fire spreading beneath the surface of my chest. Sophie wasn't just my friend. She was a person who had stood beside me through everything. Breakups, family problems, sleepless nights during college finals. She had been the maid of honor. I always imagined standing beside me someday. And Ryan had looked into my eyes countless times and told me he loved me. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was personal, deep, intentional. They had chosen this. Over and over again. That thought hardened something inside me. And that was when the idea of revenge first appeared. Not as a dramatic fantasy, but as a quiet decision forming slowly in the back of my mind. I didn't go back to the apartment that night. Instead, I checked into a cheap hotel a few blocks away. The room smelled faintly like bleach and old carpet, but I barely noticed. I sat on the edge of the bed with my phone in my hands, staring at Ryan's contact picture for a long time. My screen lit up again and again with messages from him. At first, they were casual. "Hey, babe, were you?" Then they became more urgent. "Did you come home already?" Eventually, Sophie texted too. "Emily, are you okay?" "Ryan said you left dinner earlier." The lies were almost impressive. My lips twisted into a humorless smile as I read them. They had no idea I had already seen everything. For a moment, I considered replying with a simple photo of what I had witnessed, just to watch the panic unfold. But that would end things too quickly, too easily. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. Revenge isn't satisfying if it happens in a moment. Real revenge requires patience. So instead of confronting them, I typed a simple response. "Sorry, work emergency came up. Staying at a hotel tonight. See you tomorrow." Ryan replied instantly. "Oh, okay, babe, Miss Yority." The message made my stomach twist, but I forced myself to keep breathing steadily. If they thought I suspected nothing, they would keep acting normal. And if they kept acting normal, they would make mistakes. That night, I barely slept. My mind ran through memories I had ignored before. The times Ryan canceled plans last minute. The moments Sophie seemed oddly defensive whenever I mentioned him. The way they sometimes shared inside jokes I didn't understand. When I look back now, the signs were everywhere. I had simply trusted them too much to see them clearly. By morning, my shock had transformed into something colder, more controlled. I wasn't going to explode emotionally like they might expect. Instead, I was going to learn everything. The next day, I returned to my apartment just after noon. The moment I stepped inside, I noticed the subtle evidence of what had happened there. The bedroom door was open. My sheets had been changed, but not carefully enough to hide the rushed attempt. The faint smell of Sophie's perfume still lingered in the air. Ryan was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV, though the tension in his posture gave him away immediately. When he saw me, his face lit up with exaggerated relief. "Hey," he said quickly, standing up. "I was worried about you. Sophie came by last night too, actually. We thought maybe something happened." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. But instead I forced my expression to remain calm. "Yeah, work stuff," I said casually, hanging my coat on the rack. "Nothing serious." Ryan walked over and kissed my forehead. The same familiar gesture he had used hundreds of times before. I forced myself not to flinch. For the next few days, I played my role perfectly. I smiled. I laughed. I went out to dinner with Ryan and Sophie like nothing had changed. And watching them together while they thought I knew nothing was fascinating. Once you see betrayal, you can never unsee it. Every glance they exchanged became obvious. Every subtle touch lingered a little too long. They were careful, but not careful enough. One night during dinner, Sophie excused herself to the bathroom. The moment she stood up, Ryan's eyes followed her in a way that made my stomach churn. When he realized I was watching him, he quickly looked away. That tiny moment confirmed everything I needed to know. Their affair wasn't a mistake. It was ongoing, and that realization only strengthened my resolve. A week later, the real opportunity arrived. Sophie invited me to her apartment for a wine night, something we had done dozens of times before. Her building was a modern glass complex near the harbor, filled with expensive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of lavender candles greeted me. Sophie hugged me tightly, her voice warm and cheerful. "I missed you this week," she said. "You've been so busy." I smiled back, hiding the storm raging beneath my calm exterior. "Work's been crazy," I replied, as we sat down on her couch, sipping red wine. I studied her carefully. She looked exactly the same as always, confident, radiant, completely unaware that her secret was already exposed. And suddenly I realized something important. The best revenge wouldn't just be exposing them. It would be making them destroy themselves. Over the next hour, Sophie talked endlessly about her job, her co-workers, random gossip. Meanwhile, my eyes drifted around the apartment, quietly observing everything. Eventually, Sophie left the room to grab another bottle of wine from the kitchen. The moment she disappeared, I moved quickly. Her phone was lying on the coffee table, unlocked. My heart pounded as I picked it up, scrolling through her messages until I found Ryan's name. What I saw there made my chest tighten again. Months of messages, flirting, late-night conversations, plans to meet when I was busy. One message from Ryan read, "She trusts us completely. Sometimes I almost feel bad." Sophie's reply followed seconds later. "Relax. She'll never find out." My hands trembled slightly as I took screenshots and sent them to myself before placing the phone back exactly where it had been. When Sophie returned with the wine, I was already smiling calmly, as if nothing had happened. Inside, however, something had shifted permanently. I now had proof, evidence, and more importantly, I had time. Because revenge, I realized, isn't about anger. It's about strategy. And by the time I finished with them, Ryan and Sophie wouldn't just lose me. They would lose everything. Once you know the truth about someone, every memory you have with them changes shape. Moments that once felt warm begin to look suspicious. Conversations replay themselves in your mind with new meaning. And smiles that once felt comforting suddenly appear like masks hiding something darker. Over the next several days, that was exactly what my life became, an endless process of re-examining everything I thought I knew about Ryan and Sophie. Yet the strangest part of it all was how calm I felt on the outside. The old version of me, the girl who trusted too easily and believed people meant what they said, would have confronted them immediately. She would have cried, screamed, demanded explanations. But that girl had disappeared the moment I looked through Sophie's half-open bedroom door and saw them together. What remained was someone colder. Someone who had finally realized that trust, once broken, can turn into something far more powerful than anger. It can turn into patience. For the next week, I began quietly building the foundation of my plan. Every interaction with Ryan and Sophie became an opportunity to observe them more closely. It was almost fascinating how easy it was to notice things now that my eyes were open. Ryan started working late more frequently, and whenever he did, Sophie somehow seemed unavailable at the exact same time. When the three of us spent time together, they avoided being alone in the same room for too long, clearly afraid of appearing suspicious. But their caution only proved how much they had to hide. I watched their body language carefully. The quick glances they exchanged, the way Sophie sometimes bit her lip while Ryan spoke, the subtle tension that passed between them whenever I stepped out of the room for even a few seconds. It was like watching actors trying desperately to stay in character during a play. And the longer I observed them, the more certain I became that their lives had been going on for months. But revenge, I had learned, is most effective when it unfolds slowly, instead of confronting them. I continued playing my role as the trusting girlfriend and best friend. I laughed at Ryan's jokes. I hugged Sophie when we met for coffee. I even pretended to vent to her about small relationship frustrations, knowing full well she was secretly the cause of them. The irony of those conversations almost made me smile sometimes. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, I began collecting more evidence. I saved screenshots of their messages, recorded subtle conversations on my phone whenever they mentioned suspicious plans, and even checked Ryan's laptop while he was in the shower one morning. What I found there confirmed everything I already suspected. Hidden inside his email account were hotel reservations made during nights when he claimed to be working late. Most of the bookings were in small boutique hotels around the city, places discreet enough that no one would ask questions, and every reservation was made for 2 people. At first, seeing the proof still hurt. Each piece of evidence felt like another small knife sliding into my chest. But strangely, the pain began fading faster than I expected. In its place came something far more focused, determination, because the more I uncovered, the clearer my plan became. Simply exposing their affair wasn't enough. If I confronted them privately, they would lie, apologize, and try to shift the blame onto circumstances or confusion or alcohol. They might even attempt to turn the story against me somehow. No, if I wanted revenge that truly mattered, it had to happen in a way they couldn't escape. It had to destroy the carefully constructed image they had built around themselves. And that meant waiting for the perfect moment. That opportunity arrived sooner than I expected. One evening, Ryan came home looking unusually excited. I was sitting on the couch pretending to work on my laptop when he walked in, tossing his jacket over a chair. "Guess what?" he said with a grin. "My company is hosting a big networking party next month. Like a huge one. Investors, executives, the whole deal." I looked up casually. "That sounds important." Ryan nodded proudly. "It is, and I can bring a guest. Actually, 2 guests if I want." He paused for a moment, watching my reaction. "I was thinking you and Sophie should come. She works in marketing too, right? It could be good for her career." The suggestion almost made me laugh out loud. The 3 of us together at a fancy event. What a perfect picture of friendship and loyalty. But inside my mind, something clicked instantly, because suddenly I realized that Ryan had unknowingly handed me the exact stage I needed. A large corporate party meant dozens of people, co-workers, managers, investors, and friends, all gathered in one place. It meant attention, reputation, and public image. And most importantly, it meant an audience. I forced myself to smile warmly. "That actually sounds fun," I said. "Sophie would love that." Ryan looked relieved, clearly pleased that I supported the idea. Later that night, I texted Sophie to tell her about the invitation. Her reply came almost immediately. "Seriously? That sounds amazing. I'd love to go." I could practically hear the excitement in her voice. Of course she wanted to attend. Events like that were perfect opportunities for networking and career advancement. What she didn't know was that the same event would soon become the moment her entire world collapsed. Over the following weeks, I carefully continued my quiet investigation. By now I had enough evidence to prove the affair beyond any doubt. Screenshots, messages, and even a short recording of Ryan leaving Sophie a voicemail late one night when he thought I was asleep. But I didn't reveal any of it. Instead, I stored everything securely on a hidden cloud drive, organized in files like pieces of a puzzle waiting for the right moment to be assembled. Meanwhile, my behavior around them remained completely normal. If anything, I became more affectionate than usual. Ryan seemed pleased by the attention, and Sophie often teased me playfully about being extra clingy. The irony was almost amusing. They truly believed they had fooled me completely. But as the party approached, I began making the final preparations for what would happen that night. I spent hours planning every detail in my mind, how the conversation would start, what evidence I would reveal, and how the truth would unfold in front of everyone Ryan cared about professionally. I even visited the event venue a few days beforehand under the excuse of helping Ryan pick out seating arrangements. The ballroom was massive, filled with glittering chandeliers and tall windows overlooking the city skyline. Waiters would move between tables serving champagne, while music played softly in the background. It was the kind of place where reputations were built and destroyed quietly over polite conversation. As I stood there looking around the room, imagining what would soon happen inside it, I felt an unfamiliar sense of calm settle over me. The night of the party finally arrived on a crisp spring evening. The city air carried the faint scent of blooming flowers mixed with the salty breeze from the harbor. Ryan wore a tailored black suit, looking confident and successful, the image of a rising professional in his company. Sophie arrived shortly after us, wearing a sleek red dress that turned heads the moment she stepped into the room. She hugged me tightly, smiling brightly. "Tonight is going to be incredible," she whispered excitedly. I smiled back. "Oh, I'm sure it will be." For the first hour, everything unfolded exactly as expected. Ryan introduced us to co-workers and executives, while Sophie charmed everyone with her natural confidence. The three of us looked like the perfect trio: successful boyfriend, supportive girlfriend, and ambitious best friend. People laughed, clinked glasses, and complimented Ryan on his recent achievements. Watching it all felt surreal, like observing a carefully staged performance. But I knew the final act of that performance was about to begin. At one point during the evening, Ryan was called to the stage to give a short speech about his department's recent success. As he walked toward the microphone, the room grew quiet. Dozens of eyes turned toward him with admiration. Sophie stood beside me, clapping enthusiastically, completely unaware of what was about to happen next. My heart beat steadily, but there was no fear anymore, only certainty. Because hidden inside my purse was a small flash drive containing every piece of evidence I collected over the past month. Every message, every screenshot, every recording. And within minutes, those secrets would no longer belong only to me. Ryan began his speech confidently, thanking his team and speaking about trust, loyalty, and the importance of strong relationships both professionally and personally. The irony of his words almost made me smile. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. That was my moment. Slowly, I stepped forward to the crowd toward the stage. Sophie watched curiously, assuming I simply wanted to congratulate him. But as I reached the microphone, the room gradually fell silent again. Ryan looked at me with mild confusion. "Emily," he asked softly. I met his eyes calmly and smiled. "Hi, everyone," I said into the microphone. "Before the night continues, there's actually something very important I'd like to share about trust, loyalty, and the people we choose to surround ourselves with." Behind me, the large presentation screen flickered to life, and within seconds, the first screenshot appeared. Ryan's face turned completely white. Sophie stopped breathing, and the entire room suddenly understood that the night they expected to celebrate success was about to become something very different. For a moment after the first screenshot appeared on the massive presentation screen, the entire ballroom fell into a silence so deep it felt almost unreal. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Glasses paused halfway to people's lips, and dozens of confused eyes shifted between the glowing screen and Ryan's pale face, standing only a few feet away from me. The soft jazz music playing in the background suddenly felt out of place, like a soundtrack that hadn't yet realized the scene had changed. The screenshot itself was simple but devastatingly clear. A message from Ryan's phone to Sophie sent late one night. "She thinks I'm working late again. Come over." Beneath it was Sophie's reply. "Already on my way." A faint murmur rippled to the crowd, like wind passing over water. I heard someone whisper. Someone else gasped quietly. Ryan's confident posture from moments earlier had completely vanished. His shoulders stiffened as if his entire body had frozen. Sophie stood several feet away near the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her expression shifting rapidly between confusion and panic as she realized exactly what everyone in the room was looking at. Ryan stepped toward me quickly, his voice low and urgent. "Emily, what are you doing?" he whispered, his hand reaching toward the microphone as if he might take it away from me. But I simply took a small step back, maintaining a calm smile that felt strangely natural now. My heart wasn't racing anymore. If anything, the quiet control inside me had only grown stronger. "Just telling the truth," I replied softly before turning back toward the audience. More images appeared on the screen behind me. Screenshots of messages, photos of hotel reservations, timestamps proving how often Ryan had claimed to be working late while actually meeting Sophie. The murmuring in the room grew louder now, the confusion slowly transforming into uncomfortable understanding. Several of Ryan's co-workers began exchanging looks with each other, clearly realizing that the carefully polished image they had always seen from him was beginning to crack apart in front of them. Sophie finally pushed her way through the crowd toward the stage. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor, each step echoing through the tense silence. When she reached the front, Her voice came out trembling but loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Emily, stop," she said. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by something fragile and desperate. "This isn't the place for this." For a brief moment, I looked at her, the girl who had once been my closest friend in the world. I remembered sleepovers during high school, late-night talks during college, all the moments when I believed she would always stand beside me no matter what happened. That history flashed through my mind quickly, but it didn't weaken my resolve the way it might have weeks earlier. Instead, it only reminded me how deeply she had chosen to betray that friendship. "Actually," I said calmly into the microphone, "this is exactly the place for it." Another image appeared on the screen, this time a recording transcript of a voicemail Ryan had left for Sophie late one night. His voice echoed quietly through the speakers set around the ballroom. "Hey, I miss you. I wish we didn't have to keep hiding this." The sound of his own words seemed to hit him harder than the screenshots had. Ryan's face flushed dark red, his jaw tightening as he looked around the room at the stunned faces of his co-workers and superiors. For the first time since the presentation began, he raised his voice. "This is insane," he said sharply. "Emily, you're twisting things. You're taking private messages out of context." The excuse sounded weak even as he said it, and the room seemed to recognize that immediately. A few people near the front shifted uncomfortably, clearly unsure whether to stay or quietly slip away from the growing spectacle. But I wasn't finished yet. Slowly, I reached into my purse and removed my phone. "You're right," I said calmly, glancing at Ryan before addressing the audience again. "Private messages can sometimes be misunderstood." I tapped the screen once, and another file appeared on the large display behind me. This time it wasn't a screenshot. It was a photograph taken secretly from across the street outside one of the boutique hotels Ryan had reserved months earlier. The image showed Ryan and Sophie standing together near the entrance, laughing with their arms wrapped around each other in a way that left absolutely no room for interpretation. A collective gasp swept across the ballroom, like a sudden wave crashing against the walls. Sophie's face drained of color completely as she stared at the photo, her hands trembling at her sides. The room erupted into quiet conversations now, whispers spreading rapidly between guests who only minutes earlier had been sipping champagne and discussing business deals. Some of Ryan's co-workers looked openly shocked, while others simply stared at him with a mixture of disappointment and disbelief. Reputation, especially in a professional environment like his, was built on trust and character as much as skill. And right now, both of those things were dissolving in front of everyone he worked with. Ryan took another step toward me, his voice dropping to an urgent hiss. "Emily, please," he said, clearly realizing the damage that was unfolding around him. "Let's talk about this privately." I shook my head slowly. "We'd had months to talk privately," I replied. "You just didn't realize it." Sophie finally spoke again, her voice cracking slightly. "Emily, I swear it wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said. The words sounded painfully weak, even her own ears. A few guests standing nearby turned toward her now, recognizing her as the second person involved in the scandal. For someone who had always thrived on attention and admiration, the shift in those eyes, from friendly curiosity to judgment, must have felt unbearable. I studied her expression quietly, noticing how different she looked without her usual confidence protecting her. "You're right," I said softly. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." I paused briefly before continuing. "But neither was sleeping with your best friend's boyfriend." Another wave of murmurs moved through the room. At the edge of the crowd, one of Ryan's senior managers stood with his arms crossed, watching the scene unfold with a stern expression that made Ryan's shoulders stiffen even more. The professional consequences of this moment were becoming impossible to ignore. Ryan had built his reputation within the company as someone reliable, disciplined, and trustworthy, qualities that investors and executives valued deeply. Now that image had shattered publicly in front of dozens of the very people responsible for his career advancement. The tension in the ballroom continued building until it felt almost electric. Ryan looked like he might say something else, but the words never came. Instead, he simply stood there, trapped between anger, embarrassment, and the realization that there was no way to undo what had already been revealed. Sophie looked equally lost, her gaze shifting nervously between the crowd and the screen still displaying the undeniable evidence of their secret relationship. For several seconds, no one moved. Finally, I lowered the microphone slightly and looked around the room one last time. "I'm sorry to interrupt the celebration tonight," I said calmly, "but I believe honesty matters more than appearances." With that, I stepped away from the stage. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before it. No one stopped me as I walked through the crowd toward the ballroom doors. Behind me, whispers continued spreading through the room like wildfire. Just before I reached the exit, I heard Ryan call my name once more. But this time I didn't turn around. I simply kept walking out into the cool night air beyond the glass doors. The city lights glared across the harbor, and for the first time in weeks, the tight pressure that had lived inside my chest began to loosen. I didn't know exactly what would happen to Ryan's career after the night, or how Sophie would face the social fallout waiting for her. But I did know one thing for certain. The truth had finally been seen by everyone, and that was only the beginning of the consequences they would have to live with. The moment the cold night air hit my face outside the ballroom, I finally felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Silence. Not the suffocating silence of betrayal, but the peaceful kind that comes after a storm finally passes. Behind me, through the tall glass windows of the hotel ballroom, I could still see the chaos unfolding. Groups of people were whispering, some staring at their phones, others glancing toward Ryan and Sophie, who remained frozen near the stage like actors who had forgotten their lines. For a brief second, I allowed myself to look back. Ryan stood in the center of the room, surrounded by several of his co-workers. His confident posture was gone completely now. His shoulders were tense, and his face looked pale beneath the bright chandelier lights. One of the senior managers who had been watching earlier was speaking to him in a low, serious voice. Even from outside the room, I could see Ryan nodding stiffly, the way someone does when they know they have no real defense left. Sophie, on the other hand, stood alone near one of the cocktail tables. The confident woman who used to dominate every room she entered looked almost unrecognizable now. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, and she kept glancing around as if searching for someone who might rescue her from the situation. But no one came. For the first time in her life, Sophie wasn't the center of admiration. She was the center of judgment. I turned away before either of them noticed me watching. There was nothing left to say. The taxi ride home felt strangely calm. Boston streets glowed beneath the soft yellow streetlights, and the harbor breeze drifted to the cracked car window, carrying the faint scent of salt water and spring flowers. For weeks my mind had been filled with anger, questions, and planning. But now that it was over, those emotions had started to fade. Instead, I felt tired. Not the physical kind of tired. The emotional kind that comes after carrying something heavy for too long. When the taxi finally stopped outside my apartment building, I sat there for a moment before getting out. The familiar brick structure looked exactly the same as it had the night my entire world changed. But I wasn't the same person who had walked out of it weeks ago. I paid the driver, stepped on the quiet sidewalk, and walked upstairs slowly. When I opened the apartment door, the silence inside greeted me like an old friend. Ryan's jacket was gone. So were several of his shoes by the door. Apparently, he had already realized he wouldn't be staying here anymore. A small laugh escaped my lips. For once, he was right. The next morning, the consequences began. It started with a message from Ryan. Actually, dozens of them. My phone buzzed constantly as notification after notification appeared on the screen. "Emily, please answer me. You didn't have to do that. We can fix this. I made a mistake." Mistakes. The word made my stomach twist slightly. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. A mistake is sending the wrong email. What Ryan and Sophie had done wasn't a mistake. It was a choice, repeated many times. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. Sophie tried calling later that afternoon. Her name flashing across my screen still felt surreal. For 10 years, Sophie had been the person I called whenever something went wrong in my life. Now she was the problem I had finally removed from it. Her voicemail arrived a few minutes later. Her voice sounded shaky, nothing like the confident tone she always used. "Emily, please. I know you hate me right now, but we need to talk. Ryan told me what happened after you left. His boss pulled him aside and basically ended his promotion on the spot. People are talking about it everywhere. You didn't have to ruin everything like that. Ruin everything. The irony almost made me laugh. I deleted the voicemail without listening to the rest. Within a few days, the story spread further than I expected. Ryan's company wasn't exactly a small startup anymore. Several employees had recorded parts of the confrontation that night. Clips started circulating online. Not everywhere, but enough. Enough for people to recognize the situation. Enough for Ryan's reputation to take a hit he wouldn't recover from easily. Apparently, his company didn't fire him outright, but the promotion he had been celebrating that night disappeared immediately. His leadership team no longer trusted him to represent the company publicly, which meant his fast-rising career had suddenly slowed to a crawl. Actions meet consequences. Sophie's situation wasn't much better. Her social circle overlapped with mine in many ways. Mutual friends began hearing the story quickly, and people talk, especially when betrayal is involved. Within a week, several of our old friends had quietly stopped inviting her to gatherings, not because they hated her, but because they didn't trust her anymore. And trust, once broken, is very difficult to rebuild. 2 weeks later, Ryan showed up at my apartment. I wasn't expecting it. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, he looked smaller somehow. The confident man I once fell in love would have been replaced by someone tired and desperate. "Emily," he said quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he ran a hand through his hair nervously. "I messed up," he admitted. I leaned against the doorframe, studying him. "You didn't just mess up," I replied calmly. "You lied to me for months." He swallowed hard. "I know, but Sophie meant nothing compared to you." The sentence hung in the air between us, and suddenly I realized something important. I no longer cared whether that was true or not, because the version of Ryan I loved no longer existed. Maybe he never had. "Ryan," I said gently, "you didn't lose me the night I exposed the truth." He looked confused. "When did I lose you?" he asked. I met his eyes calmly. "The moment you decided she was worth betraying me." For the first time since arriving, Ryan didn't have a response. After a few seconds, he nodded slowly. Then he turned and walked down the hallway, without saying another word. That was the last time I saw him. 3 months later, my life looked completely different. The apartment felt lighter somehow, without constant tension filling the rooms. I redecorated, bought new plants, even replaced a bed that had once held too many lies. Work had also improved, without emotional chaos distracting me. I had more energy to focus on my graphic design projects. One of my freelance designs even went viral online, bringing in several new clients. Sometimes it felt strange how life could move forward so quickly after something that once seemed devastating. But maybe that's the real lesson betrayal teaches you. The people who hurt you aren't the end of your story. They're just a chapter. One evening, I sat by my apartment window, watching the sunset paint the Boston skyline in shades of gold and orange. My phone buzzed softly beside me. A message from an unknown number appeared. For a moment, I hesitated before opening it. It was from Sophie. Just one sentence. "I'm sorry for everything." I stared at the message for a long time, not because I wanted to respond, but because I realized something surprising. I wasn't angry anymore. The revenge I had planned, the truth I had revealed, it had already done what it needed to do. The rest of their lives would be shaped by the consequences of their choices. But my life didn't need to revolve around them anymore. So I locked my phone and placed it face down on the table. Outside the window, the city lights slowly flickered to life as evening settled over the streets. And for the first time since everything happened, I felt completely free.